afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Bellingham City Council afternoon session of March 9th. Our first order of business is committees, and the first committee is Lake Wacom Reservoir Natural Resource. Dan Hamill's the chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Lake Wacom Policy Group met on February 25th here in Council Chambers. Policymakers included Carl Weimer from Wacom County Council, Pinky Vargas, and myself representing Bellingham City Council, Leslie McRoberts from Lake Wacom Water and Sewer District, and Larry Brown from the Sudden Valley Board. Staff presented a draft of the Lake Wacom Management 2015 to 2019 work plan with the goal of obtaining feedback on major elements of the plan. The plan has 10 components, including land use and preservation, stormwater, education and engagement, recreation, aquatic invasive species, and utilities and transportation. Staff was able to report that the residential retrofit program would continue along the same lines as the current pilot program, but some elements of the program would change to improve targeting of properties that contribute higher levels of phosphorus. New outreach materials and a new program name that better reflect the outcomes and goals of the program will be created. There were several comments and observations from policymakers around the education and outreach component, including how that program area would be staffed and administered with the low FTE count that was represented. Policymakers also asked that non-technical language be used in outreach materials so that they are more accessible to the public. Policymakers also asked that the groups responsible for completing the plan components be identified within the plan. Public comments included providing more information on the city's Nooksack diversion. There was an observation that the educational allotment of $60,000 appeared to be too low to provide broad engagement of watershed residents on stormwater issues. There are also multiple observations and questions regarding the use of herbicides near the lake, and several observations that the plan should include more data on numerical goals around phosphorus reduction. The public is encouraged to make comments and ask questions about the Lake Wacom Management Program 2015 to 2019 work plan. Contact information and the plan itself are available at cob.org. The next meeting of the Lake Wacom Policy Group is March 16th at 2:30 at the City of Bellingham Fireplace Room at the Municipal Court Building at 625 Halleck Street, and public comments are open till March 18th. Any questions? Jack.
Thanks, Dan. I had a chance to read this over the weekend, and the thing that, I mean, it's a good plan. I'm really excited about it. But the one thing that kind of jumps out at me is that a lot of the action items that are associated with the plan are, there's two categories, and I'm stereotyping this because there's some exceptions, but it's either work that's going to be done in 2015, a little bit in 2016, or the rest is going to be like it's an ongoing type of activity. And different from like our transportation improvement program, where we have projects that are kind of listed out for, it's certainly the next 3 years, but really for like the next 6 years that we understand what's going to happen. This plan seems to be a one-year work plan of what we're going to do in 2015 with an understanding that we're doing all this ongoing activity. And I'm just kind of curious, do we have other things that are not in this plan that we're going to be doing in those other years, or how does that work? I mean, how did this plan get put together that way compared to some of the other public works or city plans that we do?
Yeah, thank you, Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. That's a good question, and I'll take a stab at it, and then John can fill in the details. But I think you're accurate in saying that there are things that are yet to be identified. So when we look at the 6-year transportation improvement program, we've identified all of the capital work, or at least what we think will be the capital work over the 6-year period. In the case of Lake Wacom, we have the first couple of years identified, but we recognize that some of the projects have not been fully scoped or even identified yet. So we've put money in the plan to show that there'll be capital expenditures in the out years, but yet may not have identified the individual capital projects. Likewise with like the homeowner incentive program, which will be called residential retrofit or some name to be determined, we're going through the process in 15 and 16 in developing what exactly is that program going to look like? How is it going to differ from what we know as a homeowner incentive program, which was the ecology funded program, as the city and the county in the water and sewer district fund these programs locally, how do we want to scope or change the way those programs look in the future? And some of that has not yet been identified. So we have some work items that do show up as 15, 16. Part of that is developing the programs and the capital projects that will be implemented over the remainder of the 5-year program. John will fill in some of the details.
Yeah, so what I have in front of me now is a compilation for the both the city and the county capital programs for stormwater and water quality improvement. And looking at the City of Bellingham side, there are a number of stormwater watershed projects that are programmed out in 2017, 18, 19, and 2020. So we have identified funding sources and the projects themselves. Of course, the design work hasn't begun on many of those programs, but for example, out here in 2017, upgrading the Park Place facility, Alum facility, obtaining easements and retrofitting the stormwater system that moves through the Silver Beach neighborhood, retrofitting the Mill Wheel Pond, doing some work there because that's been an ongoing issue with the private, with that facility. And then, of course, carrying forward, as Ted mentioned, the residential retrofitting. And the county also has a number of projects that are lined out for 2017 and 18. So I guess what I'm saying is that while programmatically the details of various programs that will be delivered in the watershed are not detailed, the capital side of it should be.
Okay. Other questions? Michael?
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I agree, Jack. This is a good program. I like seeing the heavy emphasis on projects to deal with runoff from ongoing property. But this is a comment I'm going to repeat that I gave when I was in the audience at that policy group meeting. The staff's done an excellent job of spending all the money and planning to spend all the money we have available at the moment to achieve our 50-year TMDL compliance, maybe even better than that, maybe even clean up the lake in 40 years. Me personally, I've been advocating for an even more aggressive schedule, a 25, 30-year schedule, which was talked about in the policy group before, but it requires significantly expanded funding. I would like this council to request this administration to look at what it would take to achieve that 25, 30-year window, not just in round numbers, but actually try to flesh it out. It may be that that's too heavy a lift and we can't do it, but right now I think we're defaulting into what we can do, which is good, but maybe not as good as we'd like. So that's my comment on the draft plan, because I did confirm that the current spending level that's in the draft plan for the next 5 years really is on that trajectory to meet that 40, 50-year time frame rather than something any faster than that.
Other questions or comments, Jack?
Just one other comment, and I don't know, I understand this is a draft. I don't know if it will be changed, because my understanding is we have an April 22nd joint meeting with the county council and the district. When I look at the program overview in the accomplishments timeline on page 93 of the packet and page 5 of the plan, one thing I see that is somewhat missing, that just to toot the city council's horn a little bit, is that we did vote to increase the surcharge from $5 to $12, and that $7 increase represented about $3 million a year, or about $15 million over the course of the work plan. $15 million in a $45 million work plan, that's a fairly significant component to resolving some of our issues. And to me, it seems like that should at least be listed in our accomplishments, just to understand that, you know, this council did something that wasn't very popular with a lot of people, but we decided it was important for the watershed, and we acted upon it accordingly. And to me, it seems like it should be listed in along with these other things.
Duly noted, and I think that's a good thing to make sure that we draw some attention to. And it actually addresses a little bit of what Councilmember Lilliquist was observing, and that is, if you remember that over the course of preparing for the writing of this plan and looking for direction on trajectory and that sort of thing, the administration went back to the county and said, well, look, we do need to be able to deliver a level of service in the watershed that's going to be in excess of this 50-year trajectory, and so on and so forth. And the county responded by dedicating some additional expenditure authority to the program so that we could meet that trajectory goal over the course of the next budget cycle. And then we recognized that those dollars, a number of those dollars, that 30% of the stormwater land acquisition fees would be available again after 2018 when debt service on previous property acquisitions rolled off. And that creates an environment in which we can have further conversation about increasing that trajectory once again. So we know that about $800,000 additional will be available starting in 2019, and that puts us in a great position to be able to be even more aggressive starting at that point. From a practical standpoint, we're certainly going to need a little bit of time to prepare ourselves. We can't change the ship of state overnight, if you will. In other words, we need to make sure that we've got the capacity, we have some more detailed knowledge of what kinds of solutions need to be implemented out in the county, and the county has at present money put aside in 2015 to redo their comprehensive plan for Lake Whatcom, their capital side for their Lake Whatcom plan. So what we would expect to see then over the course of the next several years is their capital program fleshed out. Our capital investment program over the course of the next 5 years will largely be built out, and we'll be focusing on the city side, on the residential programs, and then be having more conversations with the county about how to get that work done. So I think there is room for more discussion going forward, and I would close by observing that the trajectories that we put forward are really broad-scale planning level looks at what we think it might cost to meet these goals, these watershed goals. We have yet to go back and remodel the influxes of phosphorus into the lake, and that could very easily, somewhat reallocate to the various sub-watersheds, the tributary watersheds, the TMDL limits. So we expect that some of those goals are going to change over time. And we also expect to have better information, better understanding of how successful these various kinds of residential programs can be. And at present, we are doing market research in the watershed, and we'll have some more conversation about this going forward, but to understand how to best approach those property owners who have the highest value in terms of phosphorus reductions. So all of that stuff is on the docket for the next 2 years and is contained in this 5-year plan. And I think it's going to be a real exciting time for this program as we transition from really piloting a lot of this work into real implementation. So.
Okay. All right. End of committee.